Get in, angels, we're talking about weaponized therapy and healing language. Not every person that's using words like gaslighting, narcissist, accountability, healing are talking about the same thing. And a lot of the times, there's a very real and unfortunate reality that people are using these terms as a means to avoid accountability and avoid the work, as it were. More and more often, I'm seeing comments on my videos that go one of two ways. A person that's either saying the work that I'm doing and the language that I'm using could be used to manipulate, coerce, or abuse someone, or conflating the content that I make with the weaponization of therapy speech. So let's talk about it. First and foremost, language is supposed to be descriptive, not prescriptive. One of the biggest gripes I have with this desire to pathologize and archetype everything, whether it's the secure attached, the anxious attached, the narcissist, is that these words are really designed to help us name dynamics, name things that are going on so that we can better discuss, talk about, and work through them, not sort of blanket labeling folks and diagnosing folks, if that makes sense. These words are supposed to help us describe things that are already there. It's not supposed to be a thought-terminating cliche. Words like accountability, words like healing, words like gaslighting, these are meant to help facilitate conversations and ultimately draw us nearer to each other. Unfortunately, what happens more and more is that these words are used as a mechanism for control. And while anyone can be guilty of this consciously or unconsciously, it mostly ends up landing on the backs, the necks, and the lives of Black folks and people of color in conversations. So what can this look like? A ton of different ways. It can look like accusing someone of gaslighting when what they're asking for is a clarity of intention or more information around how they hurt you or what's going on. It can be labeling good faith questions as attacks. It can be calling any sort of disagreement or anything that activates the person's nervous system or causes a negative emotional response harm. And again, I want to be really clear. Discomfort isn't harm. It can also look like using the word accountability to essentially have permission to punish or demand compliance or obedience from another person. And this isn't just problematic because it undermines the purpose of these words, which is to increase our ability to connect and relate, to be able to call in our loved ones and our community members, and to be able to heal through conflict. It also undermines the purpose of them. Gaslighting is a real form of abuse, right? And so when we use that word to silence, to seize control of a conversation, or to essentially get our way and avoid discomfort or uncomfortable feelings, we completely undermine the ways that that word needs to be used to protect victims of abuse and violence. Developing language around abuse, around violence, around relationality in general is something that's been really hard won, and legitimizing these words has taken a lot of time. And it's frankly kind of a spit in the face to that work to use those words to control a situation, redirect attention, or avoid personal accountability or personal discomfort. So how can we tell if we're maybe misusing these words or if the words are being misused in our direction? Something I like to think a lot about is who is centered and what is the concept of safety. When we're thinking about the concept of safety collectively, then we have to be thinking about a lack of control, right? A ceding of control, a collaborative, fostered energy. When we're trying to control an outcome, we're centering ourselves, our safety, and our discomfort in a conversation or in a process that involves others. We need to start asking ourselves, am I actually unsafe or am I uncomfortable? Am I actually unsafe or am I defensive? Am I actually unsafe or have I done something that maybe I'm not proud of or maybe I feel conflicted about and I feel defensive and fearful that I will be punished for it? We need to understand the difference between being challenged, being queried in good faith, and being harmed. And of course, this is easier said than done. Any sort of impulse to protect one's image requires a deep sense of distrust in the environment, right? It essentially means I don't trust you to see the best in me, even if I make a mistake. But we have to get good at recognizing whether we're listening, whether we're being compassionate, or whether we're trying to protect how others see us and control for how others see us. We have to start being honest. Because the consequences of misusing this language are devastating. This is why Black people and people of color end up being called dangerous, unsafe, violent bullies, especially when weaponized by white people and white women. This creates a natural sense of aggression when trans people attempt to advocate for themselves that ends up getting them unalived, arrested, and beyond, kicked out of housing, right? And frankly, real harm gets missed when we undermine the meaning of these words because people stop taking them seriously and they hear a word like gaslight, they hear a word like accountability, and they just shut down because it's been misused and misabused. The fact that language is changing and evolving to include more perspectives and more experiences, especially relationally, is a good thing. However, we need to be really responsible with how we're using these new words and giving them the credit and the value and frankly the sacredness that they deserve. So many people, generations of people, had to go through life without any language around what they were experiencing, feeling isolated and alone, like hand over mouth, unable to articulate what they knew was happening to them. And through the sharing of those experiences, we were able to develop language in just a rapid amount of time. Like when you really think about the development of these words, it's a pretty short period of time. And for this, I think we should be a lot more mindful, a lot more self-aware, and take a lot more personal responsibility with how we use them. That being said, as it relates to my content, I try to use language that talks about what is happening, not who or what is who or what. You will very rarely hear me use the word narcissist. You will very rarely hear me use any sort of words that are prescriptive, because I think it's much more important to get good at talking about what's happening between us or what's happening in general than I guess the big proper noun of it, because sometimes too, even that is a form of relational and emotional bypassing. Relational work is really, really hard, but we don't need to make it harder on ourselves by getting a really incredible set of tools and then deciding that we've misused them to the point that we no longer trust them. You feel me?